Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. My name is AJ, and today's topic is about China and the truth about stealing technology, stealing IP, stealing property rights. And I'm gonna try and do a video on this once and for all because you see a lot of people in my comment section saying China steals technology. The only reason China is successful is by stealing technology, and you see a lot of Americans, even Indians, are saying that. I mean, lately there's a couple of Indians have been saying that, so they can talk. I mean, let's not go there, shall we? So, but a lot of Americans are saying that, saying China is a stealer, they steal a lot of technology, blah blah blah. But I want to put this story to rest once in a while, guys. First of all, I saw this article. It says US complains others steal its technology, others as in China, but America was once a tech pirate itself. So before I start on this article, I want to go back, all the way back to the beginning, guys, and I want to tell you that who invented gunpowder? Gunpowder was invented in China, and gunpowder is what was used by the West to colonize countries all over the world. Like the British at the time, 1800s, they used gunpowder to literally colonize half the world, and gunpowder was invented in China. So wouldn't you call that stealing from China? So let's go back to this article, and before I do, I just want to also talk about other things as well. For example, there's a lot of articles here, as you can see. China stealing our technology. China stealing our technology. FBI is investigating China stealing technology. Why can't China innovate? They can only steal. And you got this lady here, who's a former Hewlett Packard CEO, argues that Chinese are not entrepreneurial, don't innovate, and not terribly imaginative in her argument against a common core education policy. And she also says that I have been doing business in China for decades, and I will tell you that the Chinese can take a test, but when they can't do is innovate. She says they are not terribly imaginative, they are not very entrepreneurial, they don't innovate, and that is why they are stealing our intellectual property. And this is former HP CEO. I mean, HP is one of the biggest technology companies in the US, as you know. And for her to be saying something like that just shows the brains on these people who are running these tech companies. And it's absolutely ridiculous. For her to be saying Chinese cannot innovate, you got to look at last year's report where Chinese unicorns were second in the list. And those of you who don't know what a unicorn is, these are privately owned companies valued at US 1 billion. And these are obviously tech companies or innovation companies. So you got all of these companies like Huawei, TikTok in there, and many other companies valued at more than 1 billion. And Chinese companies are second in the list compared to, obviously, America's still at the top. But if you compare this to 10 years ago, 10 years ago, there was hardly any Chinese companies in this list. And now, within 10 years, they are second in the list. And you can see here, you can see China, including Hong Kong, was home to 125 unicorns, 26% of the world's total. And 10 years ago, there was hardly any. So this shows how much they can innovate, how much they've improved. And imagine what it's going to be like 10 years later, or even 5 years later. You know, so for her to be saying things like that is absolutely crap. And for a lot of Americans to say that China cannot innovate, you just got to look at examples like Huawei and TikTok even. And one of the reasons Huawei was banned in US is because they had 5G, and no US companies had 5G. And Trump even admitted to himself, you know, he said there needs to be a local 5G company based in US, and he's gave a challenge out saying, you know, I challenge somebody who can come out with the 5G, blah, blah, blah. But he's happy to kick out Huawei because they're the first ones who invented 5G, and then and because they realize, these Chinese companies are innovating better than American companies. Why else would they ban them? Why else would they put them on the blacklist? Same with all these other Chinese companies in US blacklists. They're calling it as national security. Well, the truth is they're scared of these companies outpacing US companies. That's what the problem is. But anyway, a lot of I wouldn't say stupid, but a lot of ill-informed people around the world still think China copies the US, but they don't realize that the US does exactly the same. And sometimes in my comment section, there's certain people saying, give me an example US stole something. Well, I'll give you two examples. There was a time when US stole a Soviet submarine, because during the height of the Cold War, Soviet submarines had better tech than US submarines. So what they did, they stole a US submarine. And there was also a time when US stole a Soviet satellite. And Soviet satellites at the time, everyone knows that the Soviets were the first people to send a man up into space. It wasn't the Americans, it was the Soviets. And Soviets were way ahead of Americans in terms of space. And US stole a Soviet satellite so they can learn how it works and things like that. So don't tell me that US doesn't do the same. US doesn't steal technology from other countries. US has been doing it for years. And this article proves that. I mean, you have to go back to when Britain was the leader of the world in the 1800s. They had colonies all over the world. They were the top company. The pound was the reserve company, and they had so much power. And you can see here in 1787, an American agent was intercepted by British authorities as he was trying to smuggle new technology out of the UK. So at the time, US was the up-and-coming power, and they were trying to steal a lot of technology from the UK. And sometimes they get caught, sometimes they wouldn't get caught. So don't tell me that US has never done the same. US, has always done it. And China, I'll get onto China next. But the fact that all you Americans, Indians, and all of the people that are saying America is, a saint, it doesn't steal anyone's technology, it doesn't have to. You've been doing it for years, since the 1700s. So you wanted me to show you proof? I've shown you some proof. So let's get down to the main topic and talk about China. And I've already explained how gunpowder was invented in China. However, I want to kind of give you a brief history of China. And 30-40 years ago, China was very poor at the time. They had a lot of manpower. Wages were cheap, property was cheap, everything was cheap in China. And when the Japanese invaded China, they caused a lot of atrocities. The Japanese used to call China the poor man of Asia, or the sick man of Asia. And it was part of the 100-year of humiliation that China had, not only from the West, but also from Japan. Anyway, going back to my story, the West was doing very, very well. It was the leader of capitalism, where at the time America was called the American Dream, where anyone can go to America and become a millionaire or billionaire. There's nothing stopping you. And it was the leader of the capitalists, leader of the free world, etc. The American dream. And there came to a point where the wages got so high, land and property and to do business in America got so high that companies, the economy was stagnating, and companies started making less and less profit because of the high wages, the high cost of raw materials, high cost of rent and properties, etc. So everything was stagnating. So they looked at China, right, and they thought, oh, look at this. We got 1.4 billion people. We got access to a huge amount of manpower here. Very cheap labor, very cheap property costs, very cheap manufacturing, very cheap raw materials. Why don't we take our bases to China and use those resources, use China, use those people, but we still make all the profit. So they kind of got China added to the World Trade Organization, and China in return said, look, okay, we're happy to give you our land, we're happy to give you 1.4 billion people, access to our 1.4 billion people. You can, give them as much jobs as you want, and in return we want a joint venture with all of these companies where you teach us some of the technology. And so a lot of these capitalist companies like Apple and many other companies, they agreed. They said, okay, yeah, that's a small price to pay. You guys are very poor, you need the technology, we need the workforce, we need your country, so it's a good deal. So a lot of companies then started opening up, after China joined the World Trade Organization. A lot of companies opened up in offices in China, opened up factories in China. They used a huge amount of labor workforce who offered them very cheap wages, and companies such as Apple were making a huge profit. So a lot of American companies then moved their manufacturing bases to China, and as you know, with the cheap, not only just cheap labor, but the cheap cost of building a manufacturing plant in China is very cheap. So the land was cheap, rent was cheap, properties was cheap, so they're buying huge plots. As you know, China is big, so they're buying huge factories, filling them up with workers, and basically making stuff with peanuts, really, and they were selling it back to the American consumer for a cheaper price than they would have if they made it in America. So this continued over the 80s, 90s, 2000. Nobody put a gun into these American capitalist companies to go to China and do this. And in return, a lot of America had lost their factories and lost their jobs. They're blaming China for it, but nobody put a gun to China's head and did this. It was all down to It was all Americans' decision. It was all down to these American companies who wanted to make a bigger profit. It was all down to greed, nothing to do with China. China didn't force anyone. China didn't even force these companies to do a technology transfer. These companies did it themselves, and because all they wanted was a huge profit. That's all they wanted. They didn't care. They were teaching the Chinese technology, they were doing all the technology transfers. They didn't care as long as they made a bit of money. They didn't care, because as far as they were concerned, China at the time was no threat. Giving them a bit of technology transfer is not a big deal, because they still do, they do that to a lot of poor countries, and they've been doing that to India, and India has not been going up like China has, and they've been doing it to other countries as well. They did it to South Korea as well. And look at South Korea. South Korea after the Korean War was a shambles. So they wanted, I think the American plan was to have China to become something like South Korea, a democracy, a country that's going to house American troops, a country that's going to listen to America. And I think that's what Americans wanted, really. They wanted to turn China into the next South Korea, because as you know, South Korea is a democracy and pretty much controlled by America with all its troops in there and what have you not. So they thought they could probably do the same to China. Unfortunately, that didn't work. And they thought, oh look, we got a huge base of people, 1.4 billion people. If we set up our factories there and stuff, and we can sell our goods to all the Chinese, and it's a win-win for all of these capitalist companies, just a way of making more money. So, like I said, nobody put a gun to China's head for all these companies to move to China and do all of these technology transfers. And not only that, a lot of these factories were leaving America. And if you look at America now, literally, places like Detroit and stuff like that. There's so many empty factories, so many empty houses in Detroit, all over America, and there's so many homeless people around. So while China has been going up and up in terms of its economy, it started moving people away from poverty into prosperity. America's been going the other way around. While America was prosperous, had a huge middle income, suddenly with all of these expensive house prices and land prices and healthcare, a lot of people that don't have money ended up going homeless, or going to jail, or a lot of other things. Americans started going the other way around, from prosperity to poverty, while in China people started going from poverty to prosperity. And it's now come to a point where China has, in terms of PPP, is overtaken America, but soon they're saying that the economy is going to overtake America very soon, within the next 10 years, and suddenly China is a threat, and suddenly America's like, oh crap, what the hell have we been doing? We've been giving China all of our technologies, and look at them now. They're very close to us. They're very powerful. Plus, they're a communist country. We need to stop them. So they started coming up with all these lies and stuff. Oh, China's stealing our technology. So you can see all of these newspaper articles everywhere. China's stealing our technology. China's stealing our jobs. And then they started upping the ante as well. They started talking about Xinjiang and forced labor and genocide, and they started upping up the ante even more. And they said, oh, they released COVID to our shores, and all of this stuff. Basically, it's only happened in the last 5 years since Trump has come into power. But to be honest, whoever was in power at the time would have done the same thing anyway, because I think Trump was pretty much coerced into doing whatever he did with the trade war and everything, and Biden is being pushed to do the same. So whoever comes in power, they would have done the same thing. You can't blame Trump, you can't blame Biden, because I think in Congress, if you are anti-Chinese and you take steps to be anti-Chinese, you'll be listened to. But if you speak for China, if you try and protect China, you're pretty much going to get kicked out. You're going to be one voice against many, and you'll just be kicked out of Congress or Senate. If you go against the narrative, you can't last. You're basically a dead person. And when you got so many people graduating in China, there's more graduates in China than anywhere around the world, more than America, more than rest of the world. And China now has a platform for these graduates to excel and make something out of themselves and help the country. And not only that, there's a lot of graduates that study abroad that also go back to China. And not only that, 50, 60 years ago, when all of these Chinese were moving out to the Western countries, a lot of them are actually now moving back into China. And while 50, 60 years ago, they realized that living in America or living in Australia, living in Canada, living in UK is not very good for Chinese people right now, with all this anti-China violence going on, anti-Chinese racism. Why do you have to put up with this shit? So a lot of people are actually getting pissed off and now moving back into China. And they're sending their kids back into China, and and a lot of the families are moving back into China because they don't have to take all of this anti-racism, anti-Chinese racism, from all these Western countries anymore. China is now strong, and China can now support its people. China can now support its graduates, and that's why China doesn't need to steal anymore. There was a new investment deal with the Europeans that obviously needs to be ratified, but in it specifically says that China's not going to do any forced transfers of technology. It's written in black and white because it doesn't need to do that anymore. It's got everything it needs. You just look at its military, its space, all of these other technology, high-end technologies that China's been building, it doesn't need anyone anymore. The amount of intelligent people China has, it's probably just under a billion, educated people, graduates, under a billion. And, it doesn't need to steal technologies. It's got enough brains to do it itself. And that's why, in that European investment deal, they said, we don't need to do any forced transfers anymore. We're a high technology country now. We don't need your technology. We have our own technology. The military, right? There was since the 1980s there was a Western embargo on the military, and the West did not sell any military to the Chinese. So what did the Chinese do? They built their own military, and look at the military now. Look how strong it is with the Air Force, with the Blue Army, Navy, Green. Everywhere you look, they've done amazing. They've got a space program now, and there was a time when China was banned from the space program because they thought China's not going to add anything, And now look at them. They've got their own space station and space program, better than NASA. And everywhere you look, they've built their own jet engines as well. Building jet engines is not an easy task. There's not many countries that can do it. There's only a few countries that can do it. They've got their own nuclear weapons, a nuclear program. And they're coming up with new technologies all the time, better than American technology like Huawei and many others in its unicorn. You got TikTok. The list goes on. So I don't want to hear any more stuff about China stealing technology and stuff. That's just like a poor man's cop out, really. Just come up with something more intelligent. If you're gonna come onto my channel and put comments saying China steals technology, that just shows you've got no brain yourself. You need to do your own research. Stop being a sheep. Don't be a sheep that follows your media, follows your government with what they say, follows all these, ridiculous accusations and statements. Do your own research. Have your own brain. Be an individual, like God has made you. Stop being a sheep. You know what I mean? And if you're gonna come to my channel and make silly accusations, back them up. Prove it. Back it up. Show me evidence. Then we'll have a proper conversation. But don't just throw stuff in my channel, in my comment section, and just because you heard it somewhere else or you heard it in the Weon channel, just have a bit of intelligence. I'm all up for having intelligent conversation. Nobody gets blocked in my channel. Everyone has a say to do. Everyone's welcome to say whatever they want, but keep it clean and keep it intelligent. That's all I want to say. So anyway, guys, that's all for today. Let me know what you think and put yourselves in the comment section. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Do whatever you can to help promote the channel. Really appreciate it. If you like the channel and you want to support what I do, then there's a Patreon, or you can buy me a coffee. Until the next video, guys, I'll see you soon.